There was a time when screens would dim, notification sounds would make hearts race, and every alert brought a rush of excitement. Under the purple and blue neon lights of internet cafes, thousands of young people squeezed their dreams, hopes, and perhaps their first loves between the keys of their keyboards. This was the golden age of MSN Messenger. When Windows Live Messenger, as it was also known, said hello to the world in late 1999, no one could predict it would become a generation's digital memory, its collective consciousness. In those days, the internet wasn't at your fingertips like today. Those who had computers at home were the lucky few. For most of us, the internet began at that neon-lit shop on the corner of the street. Do you remember that first day you stepped through the door of an internet cafe? As you pushed the door open, you were greeted by the characteristic hum of computer fans, that special smell of incense mixed with cigarette smoke and young people whispering excitedly. Posters on the walls, energy drinks lined up on shelves, empty teacups accumulated on tables, hourly rates, economical packages, marathon sessions lasting all night. The internet cafe wasn't just a place, it was a generation's social space, its digital freedom zone, its gateway to new worlds. Friendships were formed here, loves began and sometimes ended. Lives changed here. Logging into MSN Messenger was like a ritual, a ceremony for that era. First, you would type your Hotmail address, that long address with the @hotmail.com extension. Then you would enter your password, letters hidden behind stars, and then the awaited moment would arrive, that login sound. Everyone who heard that sound, everyone who lived through that era, knows it, remembers it. Like Windows XP's startup melody, it was engraved in a generation's collective memory, woven into its common language. Seeing who was online, who was busy, who was invisible in your friend list was the most important thing for that day. Those online appeared in green, the busy in red, and the invisible in gray. Every color told a state. Every state told a story. You would write your status message in that little box. Sometimes the lyrics of a song you loved, sometimes sentences reflecting your emotional state, sometimes just a dot, a mark, a silence. But behind every status message, behind every dot, there was a deep story. Maybe you had gone through a breakup. Maybe you had set sail for a new love. Or maybe you just wanted to reflect your current mood. And most importantly, you would think about who was reading that status message, who understood it. Maybe that song lyric was written just so that special person would see it. The nudge feature was one of MSN's most iconic, most unforgettable features. When the other person you were talking to started typing, the screen would dim, grow darker, and you would wait for that moment. Your heart would race, your breath would hold. What will they write? What will they say? Will they say they love me or just something ordinary? With every character typed, the screen would brighten a little more, and your excitement would grow. This wasn't just a simple feature, it was an emotional state, a state of anticipation. And of course, the nudge feature, that famous screen shaking feature. If the other person wasn't responding, if they had been online for a long time but weren't writing, what would you do? You would shake the screen, make it vibrate, try to get their attention. Sometimes this was annoying, especially when trying to focus, but sometimes it was cute, especially when done by someone you loved. The response that came after that shake, that apologetic message, would make up for everything. Sometimes nudge wars would start, competing to see who could shake more. The hours spent in internet cafes were many of our first digital experiences, our first encounters with the digital world. We would play Counter-Strike for hours, form teams and hunt enemies. With Warcraft, StarCraft, FIFA, we wouldn't realize how time passed. But the most important thing was the connections made through MSN, the relationships built here. Seeing someone you knew from school appear in the cafe, sitting side by side at the same table and talking on MSN at the same time, secretly glancing at each other, this was the romance, the innocence of that era. Talking digitally while being in the same place was one of the biggest mysteries of that time. Emoticons were another essential, another symbol of MSN. At first, they were simple facial expressions, eyes and mouths drawn on yellow circles, but then they evolved, diversified, grew. Special emoticons could be uploaded, downloaded, and installed, symbols special to your love, symbols only you would understand, symbols between just the two of you. Heart, smiley, crying face, surprised face, face blowing a kiss. Each represented an emotion, each represented a meaning. Every message written would end with an emoticon. Instead of punctuation marks, emotions were expressed through symbols, using a smiley instead of a period, a surprised face instead of an exclamation mark. That was the language of that era. There were people met through MSN, new worlds discovered, chat rooms, interest groups, strangers met through mutual friends, people from far away. Sometimes these acquaintances would move to real life, from screen to street, from virtual to real. The excitement of the first meeting was one of the biggest adventures of that time. Meeting someone you met on the internet in real life, facing them in person, was both scary and exciting. How does the person in the profile picture look in real life? Are they as interesting as they wrote? These question-filled waits were among the most unforgettable memories of that era. Those who stayed on MSN past midnight know. Those who lived those hours understand. When the hours passed midnight, the atmosphere in internet cafes would change. A completely different ambiance would form. Tired but happy faces, endless conversations, laughter. One more hour would be said, then another hour, then another hour. Returning home with the first light of the morning with tired bodies but happy hearts. Dozing off at school or work the next day, resting your head on the desk, but that was okay. It was worth it. Those moments, those conversations, those connections, those laughs, all were worth it. All were unforgettable. Archived conversations were one of MSN's most beautiful features, perhaps the most valuable. When you looked back years later, months later, or even sometimes weeks later, you would see how innocent, how beautiful, how valuable those days were. Every word written, every emoticon sent, every nudge, every status change was a memory, a keepsake. Now we look and see that most of those conversations are lost, flown away. Hard drives crashed, files deleted, formats reset, but they live on in our memories, alive and bright. The hours spent in front of those computers and internet cafes also shaped a generation's digital literacy, formed its digital identity. We learned to use a computer for the first time there, to hold a mouse for the first time, to touch a keyboard for the first time. The moments we first surfed the internet and first typed something into a search engine, first sent an email to someone. Technology developed very quickly, changed very quickly, but the taste of those first experiences, the feeling of that first excitement was different, special enough to never be captured again. When MSN Messenger closed in March 2013, it meant the end of an era for many, the closing of an age. But what happened during that time, the connections made, every message sent, every nudge, every smiley, all live on in our memories, all have found a place in our hearts. Now we continue on WhatsApp, on Instagram, on TikTok, on other platforms. But that first excitement, that first feeling of discovery, that innocence, it's hard to capture, perhaps impossible. Perhaps what we miss most is that innocence, that time when technology hadn't yet taken over every aspect of our lives. The internet was a magical world back then, a treasure waiting to be discovered. Every time you logged in, you could discover something new, meet a new person, see a new world. Every MSN session was a new adventure, a new story. Now, everything is so fast, so easy, so accessible. But back then, everything was more valuable, more meaningful, because we were putting effort into it, spending time on it, giving it our labor. Yes, the MSN Messenger and Internet Cafe era is behind us, taking its place in the dusty pages of history. But it wasn't forgotten. It was too beautiful to be forgotten, too special to be forgotten. Those days when screens would dim, notification sounds would make hearts race, and every alert brought a rush of excitement, they are one of the most beautiful, most valuable examples of forgotten lives. And we're here to remember, tell, keep alive, and pass on to new generations those lives. Because to forget is to lose, and we don't want to lose those beautiful days.